Have you ever looked into your pet's eyes and felt something staring back, not just instinct, but something deeper? Something that remembers you, that moment when your dog waits at the door before you even arrive. When your cat curls up next to you just as your heart breaks, it's more than behavior. It feels like soul recognizing soul. We've always believed that humans have souls, that we carry something sacred, eternal, beyond the body. But if that's true, what about the beings who've loved us without words, who've stayed beside us through every storm, who've looked into our eyes like they've known us forever? What if your pet is not just an animal, but a soul traveling beside yours across lifetimes? Over 100 years ago, a man named Edgar Cayce, a mystic often called the sleeping prophet, shared something that shook even the spiritual world. Animals, too, have souls. And not only that, some may have walked with you, loved you, even protected you in more than one life. Edgar Cayce, whose trance readings helped thousands find healing and spiritual clarity, believed that animals are not excluded from the divine design. In one of his readings, he described animals not as soulless creatures created solely for man's utility, but as spiritual companions on their own evolutionary path, beings of light wrapped in fur, feather, or scale, journeying through lifetimes, just like us. According to Cayce, animals hold a certain group soul consciousness, meaning that while they may not express individuality like humans do, they carry a collective essence, deeply attuned to the people they bond with. He even stated that some animals, especially pets who form strong emotional bonds with humans, may begin to individualize, developing a unique soul spark through love, loyalty, and shared life experiences. This view radically reframes how we relate to animals not as lesser beings, but as souls in progress, capable of growth, memory, and spiritual resonance. And if you've ever felt like your pet knew you, not just your habits, but your moods, your pain, your silence, maybe you were right. Maybe your connection wasn't just emotional, maybe it was eternal. If that thought resonates with something buried inside you, perhaps this video will open a door not just to understand the animals we love, but to remember why we love them in the first place. And if you've ever lost a beloved pet and wondered where they went, stay with me, because Cayce's view of the afterlife might hold a gentle answer. And if you felt this kind of soul bond with a pet before, leave a comment below. Your story may help someone else believe that love like this doesn't end at death. In Edgar Cayce's worldview, nothing in creation is truly separate. All life is part of a vast spiritual continuum, where everything is evolving, growing, returning. Animals, he believed, are not just instinct-driven biological machines, but conscious participants in the soul's great unfolding. While Cayce spoke of humans as beings of individual soul identity, he described animals as existing within a group soul consciousness, especially in their natural state. But something remarkable happens, he said, when an animal bonds deeply with a human through years of shared emotion, safety, and trust. The animal begins to individualize, not in a human way, but in a soul sense, forming a unique spiritual imprint that begins to remember, to choose, to love beyond instinct. The love becomes a kind of initiation, awakening the divine seed within. Cayce suggested that this bond could stretch beyond a single lifetime. In several readings, he described pets who had traveled with their human companions across incarnations, loyal guardians returning in new bodies, drawn by the thread of a love too deep for death to dissolve. He spoke of a dog who had once been a protector in Egypt, returning in modern times as a family's constant companion, of a cat who had shared multiple lives with a child, always reappearing when the child's soul re-entered the world. To Cayce, this wasn't fantasy. It was how love works when filtered through eternity. And if you've ever felt a connection with your pet that defied explanation, as if they knew you long before you met, maybe you weren't imagining it. Maybe it was recognition. In Cayce's understanding, animals remember through energy. They carry emotional residue, a spiritual memory that follows them across lifetimes, especially when a soul bond has been activated. That's why your dog knows when you're anxious before you say a word, why your cat watches you cry and chooses to stay, even when they usually run. It's not just comfort, it's communion. And perhaps, when we grieve for our animals, what hurts the most is not just the absence of their presence, but the silence of a soul we once knew and still know. There are countless stories from people who claim they dreamed of their pets after death, not just symbolic dreams, but vivid visits where the animal looked into their eyes, wagged their tail, curled beside them again, dreams that left them waking with tears and peace all at once. Cayce would likely say those weren't dreams, they were moments of spiritual contact, brief reunions across veils thinner than we think. And if you've ever experienced something like that, don't dismiss it. These moments, no matter how fleeting, are reminders that the bond between souls, even small, furry ones, does not dissolve in death. Some animals, Cayce hinted, are old souls themselves, evolving slowly through love, service, and loyalty, perhaps preparing one day for an incarnation as a more self-aware being. Others are newer to the path but still sacred. This doesn't mean all pets are reincarnated humans or on the same trajectory, but rather that each soul, regardless of form, is held in divine regard, and that animals too are moving toward the light step by gentle step. This view invites us to see animals not as background figures in our lives, but as fellow travelers, as companions, teachers, even protectors, who may have loved us longer than memory can hold. If you've ever lost a pet and still feel their presence in quiet moments, in a familiar nudge of energy, in a scent on the wind, in the echo of their steps, it may not be imagination, it may be their way of whispering, "I'm still with you." If that thought resonates in your heart, take a moment to share your story in the comments, not just to be heard, but to honor the soul that once laid their head in your lap and asked for nothing in return but love, because maybe, just maybe, they weren't your pet, maybe they were your soul's oldest friend. If Cayce's revelations opened a doorway into the mystery of animal spirituality, then the world's great religious traditions offer centuries-old echoes that seem to hum the same quiet truth that animals are not excluded from the spiritual journey, but rather walk alongside us in their own sacred way. In Buddhism, for example, the idea of sentient beings encompasses all life forms, and the concept of Buddha nature teaches that every creature, whether human, insect, or beast, carries within it the seed of awakening. To harm an animal is to harm a being on the path, and to love one is to cultivate compassion, the very foundation of enlightenment. And perhaps that's why, even in silence, our connection with animals often feels like a meditation, a practice of presence, patience, and unconditional love. In Hinduism, animals are deeply woven into the cosmological cycle of samsara, the great wheel of birth, death, and rebirth. It is believed that the soul, or Atman, journeys through many forms, not as punishment, but as evolution. A soul may be born as a human, a cow, a bird, A dog each life an opportunity to burn karma, learn lessons, and move closer to moksha, liberation. This belief is not metaphorical but devotional, which is why in many temples across India, animals are honored, fed, protected, and even worshipped. In this light, when your dog looks at you with knowing eyes, or your cat curls into your chest as if remembering something older than time, maybe they aren't just comforting you, maybe they're journeying with you, karmically bound in grace. Christianity, on the other hand, has long wrestled with the question, do animals go to heaven? While traditional doctrine often reserved eternal life for humans, mystics and saints have long held a different view. St. Francis of Assisi, known as the patron saint of animals, spoke of birds as brothers and wolves as companions in God's creation. More recently, even Pope John Paul II stated that animals have the breath of God and are not excluded from paradise. Some theologians argue that since heaven is the fulfillment of all joy, and since for many, the joy of a pet is inseparable from love itself, then surely animals must have a place in the divine garden. If your dog was your joy, if your cat was your solace, if your horse was your healer, how could heaven be complete without them? In Native American traditions, animals are often seen not just as spiritual beings, but as teachers, guides, and carriers of messages from the spirit world. Each creature embodies a lesson: the patience of the deer, the courage of the bear, the loyalty of the wolf. To be visited by an animal in dreams or visions is not coincidence, it's contact. And when an animal dies, it's not an end, but a transformation, a shifting of form, not essence. Across cultures and continents, from ancient Egypt to the Celtic Druids, animals were seen as guardians of the soul's path, protectors not only in life, but in death, and perhaps even after. It's no surprise, then, that people from all walks of life report strikingly similar experiences. After the passing of a beloved pet, dreams so vivid they feel like visitations, sudden sensations of presence, phantom paw steps across the floor, a warm breath against the skin in the middle of a still night. These are not just stories, they are testimonies, and maybe, just maybe, they're spiritual whispers from souls that never truly left. If you've had such a moment, a dream that felt too real to forget, an encounter that defied logic but comforted your grief, hold onto it. Write it down, speak it out loud, or leave it here, in the comments below, where others carrying the same ache can see it and feel less alone. Because your story might just be the bridge between someone else's doubt and their hope. And if you've never had such a moment, but wish with all your heart that it could be true, then let this be your permission to believe that love, real love, always finds a way back. Maybe not in the form we expect, but in the way the soul recognizes best: a gaze, a presence, a warmth that needs no words to be understood. Perhaps that is the miracle that across religions, traditions, and time, the soul's light is not confined to any single species. It pulses quietly in every being that loves, protects, and remembers. Even the smallest of creatures can carry the infinite. Even a pet curled up on your lap can be proof that the sacred does not always roar sometimes. It purrs. If ancient traditions saw animals as spiritual companions, then modern science slowly, cautiously, is beginning to catch glimpses of the same truth, though through different lenses. As research in cognitive ethology and animal psychology deepens, we're discovering that animals don't just react, they remember, they grieve, They even dream what once seemed like sentimental projection is now becoming empirical observation. Elephants returning to the bones of their dead. Dogs refusing to leave the graves of their humans. Cats meowing into the silence where someone used to sit. These are not isolated stories, but patterns and patterns in science. Matter. Studies have shown that animals form long-term emotional bonds and experience separation anxiety, not just as a stress response, but as a sign of complex social attachment. Dogs have been observed to exhibit behaviors resembling mourning loss of appetite, lethargy, searching for the missing presence. Birds like parrots and crows, known for their intelligence, have been seen holding what appear to be silent vigils when one of their own dies. And while scientists are cautious with terms like grief, they no longer deny that animals feel loss in ways that echo our own. And then there are the dreams. Pet owners across the world, across languages, cultures, beliefs have reported experiencing vivid dreams after the passing of a beloved animal. Dreams where the pet appears, whole and peaceful, often gazing into their eyes, offering a moment of stillness, sometimes even turning away, as if saying goodbye. These are not fleeting fragments of the subconscious. They often carry a weight, a presence, a peace that lingers long after waking. Some psychologists refer to this as emotional imprinting, the theory that deep emotional bonds leave a residue in the psyche, which can surface in dreams, sensations, or memory. But others, particularly those in the field of transpersonal psychology, believe something more profound is at work, a genuine, if brief, crossing of planes between the living and the spirit. Dr. Rupert Sheldrake, a biologist known for his controversial theories, has studied cases of dogs who seem to know when their owners are coming home, even when those arrivals are unscheduled. His research challenges the idea that all animal behavior is explainable through routine or conditioning. There are moments that science still can't quantify: the sudden stillness of a pet before a death in the family, the way they stare into empty spaces as if sensing something unseen, or their refusal to leave your side in moments of deep emotional pain. And maybe it's not our job to reduce these mysteries into mechanisms. Maybe our role is to notice them, to respect them, to sit quietly beside them and say, I see you, I feel you, I remember you. Because if science is catching up to what the soul has always known, that love and consciousness are not exclusive to humans, then perhaps we're finally ready to bridge the gap between evidence and empathy. If you've ever experienced something with your pet that defied explanation, a knowing glance, a protective act, a moment of eerie connection, you're not alone. These moments matter, even if they can't be measured. And if you feel moved to share one of them, your story may be the one someone else needs to believe their bond was real too. Leave your memory in the comments below, not just as a post, but as a small offering to the growing recognition that science and soul might not be so far apart after all. Because in a world hungry for proof, sometimes a shared silence, a gaze, or a dream is all the evidence we need. If science begins to affirm what many have long felt in their hearts, that animals think, feel, remember, and perhaps even dream of us, then a quiet but undeniable question begins to rise. What responsibility do we carry toward those who cannot speak our language, but who still understand us without words? And if we begin to accept, even cautiously, that animals may possess some form of soul, or at least a spiritual presence capable of love, loyalty, and grief, then what does that say about the way we treat them? Does the way we exploit, discard, or ignore their suffering remain morally neutral? Or does it become something heavier, not just a biological oversight, but a spiritual one? For centuries, humans have placed themselves at the top of the ladder, rational, civilized, evolved. But perhaps true evolution is not about who can dominate, but who can protect. Perhaps the real measure of progress is not intelligence or power, but compassion towards the powerless. Because the way we treat animals, the way we raise them, consume them, confine them, or love them is not just a mirror of our culture, it is a reflection of our soul. When we look into the eyes of a creature that trusts us unconditionally, only to betray that trust with neglect or cruelty, something sacred breaks not only in them, but in us. This isn't a call to guilt, but to awareness. Not every person will stop eating meat. Not every system will change overnight. But every choice, no matter how small, is a vote for the kind of world we want to create. Choosing kindness, even when it's inconvenient, is the first quiet act of a soul awakening to its deeper purpose. And if we can recognize the light in the eyes of a dog, the gentleness in the gaze of a cow, or the fear in the trembling of a bird, then maybe we're beginning to remember that consciousness doesn't end at the human skin. In the writings of many mystics, it's said that animals exist in a more surrendered state. They do not battle the ego like humans do. They live in presence, in simplicity, in natural alignment. And so when we hurt them, we are not just interrupting a biological process. We are desecrating a form of innocence. We no longer remember how to hold. But the beauty of this truth is also its power, because it means that every act of gentleness, every rescue, every patient hand reaching toward fear is not only redemption for them, but healing for us. And maybe this is what Cayce meant all along, that the soul is not a status reserved for humans, but a flame that flickers wherever love has taken root. And if animals are walking their own spiritual path, then they too deserve dignity, safety, companionship, and reverence, not because they are useful, but because they are sacred. If you've ever changed the way you treat an animal because of something you learned, something you felt, or something that stirred in your spirit, that moment matters. That is awakening. That is evolution. And if you'd like to honor that moment, consider sharing it below, not to boast, but to bear witness, to remind others that empathy is contagious and that the smallest choice can ripple into a better world. Maybe the next time you look at an animal, don't ask what they can do for you. Ask instead what part of you they've already softened, awakened, or returned to life. Because sometimes the most human thing we can do is love without needing to be above. And perhaps, after all this, the stories, the science, the scriptures, the silent memories, we're not just asking whether animals have souls. We're being invited to remember that the soul itself is not something to be possessed, but something to be recognized in ourselves and in all living things. Maybe your pet didn't simply walk beside you in this life, but through time itself, appearing again and again to remind you of a love that doesn't forget. And perhaps the tenderness you felt wasn't just affection, but a glimpse into something eternal, a quiet, luminous bond beyond form, beyond species, beyond death. What if every moment you shared, every lick, every look, every goodbye was a thread in a sacred tapestry, weaving your soul closer to compassion, to gentleness, to the part of you that still knows how to love without armor? If that idea stays with you, even just a little, then this journey has meant something. And if someone you love with fur, feathers, or four legs has ever awakened something deeper in you, maybe now is the time to speak their name again. Not out of grief, but out of gratitude. Leave their name or memory in the comments below, like lighting a candle in their honor, because love like that never truly disappears. It only changes form. And if you feel this message could bring comfort to someone who's lost a beloved companion, feel free to share it, not to spread belief, but to offer kindness. After all, in a world often divided by what makes us different, it may be the quiet love we shared with those who could never speak that reminds us most clearly of who we truly are.